Welcome to Daily Devotions. My name is Raymond Gregory, and this past week, while I was on vacation from doing these devos, I had some very, very important business to attend, and I'll show you. Bam! Look at that. So it's safe to say I am a Batman fan, and a fan of my son, whose name is in the middle of the Batman symbol there. And so at any given day, I'm wearing some kind of Batman paraphernalia. So it's socks or a shirt underneath my other shirt, whatever it is. I'm just that big of a fan of The Dark Knight. And so I actually watched Justice League over my time here on vacation, and I wasn't that disappointed. I thought I would be a lot more disappointed than I was. Now, I was a little bummed at the way they treated Batman, obviously with Ben Affleck and stuff, but I can get over that because, you know, Batman's still awesome and DC still rocks over Marvel. But all that to say, a friend of mine, her name's Lauren, came up to me and she knows I'm a Batman fan, so she says, I got to tell you this. So somebody in my family, part of my family, has the last name Batman, like literally spelled like Batman. And it's like Bateman without the E. So their last name is Batman. I'm like, can they adopt me? That would be awesome. And so then she goes, no, I'll take you one further. They named their son Bruce Wayne Batman. Their son's name was Bruce Wayne Batman. And so I would like to meet Bruce Wayne Batman because that's pretty awesome. One beef I have with Bruce Wayne Batman, though, is if you're going to be Batman, don't make your first and middle name your secret identity. You're just giving it away. Bruce Wayne, his last name wasn't Batman, but I can forgive that because that's still pretty awesome. So I bring all that up because I just wanted you to know that I have a new Batman tattoo. No, I bring all that up because we're in day 3 in Romans, and we're going to be in Romans chapter 2, starting in verse 5, going up to verse 16. I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. And today I've titled this Devo, What is Your Secret Identity? Before we get started, I just have to say, please, DC, give The Flash a standalone movie. He was the star of the show. Anyway, okay. So we're going to be reading in Romans chapter 2, starting in verse 5, and it sounds like this. But because you are stubborn and refuse to turn from your sin, you are storing up a terrible punishment for yourself. For a day of anger is coming, when God's righteous judgment will be revealed. He will judge everyone according to what they have done. He will give eternal life to those who keep doing good, seeking after the glory and honor and immortality that God offers. Okay, so I want to stop there just for a second because in that verse 6, he will judge everyone according to what they have done. I'm going to hit you in honor of my new tattoo with 3 Batman quotes to use as points for study in this chapter of Romans, in this section of Romans. Okay, so the first quote is this. So it's in Batman Begins, the beginning of the Dark Knight trilogy by Christopher Nolan, best movies of all time. So anyway, Batman Begins, and Bruce Wayne rather comes back, and he needs to put on a front of the billionaire playboy, and so he's doing all this crazy stuff, and he comes out and he sees his old girlfriend. And the quote that kind of is interwoven throughout the movie is this: "Is not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you." And so that quote kind of makes its way through the movie. And ultimately, spoiler alert, when Batman saves her, he looks at her and says, "It's not who you are underneath, but what you do who defines you." And so basically, he lets her in on what his secret identity is. So all that to say, he will judge everyone according to what they have done. It's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you when it comes to judgment. So God's going to judge you according to what you've done, not according to what you intended to do. He won't judge us by our intentions, but rather our actions. Okay, so verse 8. But he will pour out his anger and wrath on those who live for themselves, who refuse to obey the truth and instead live lives of wickedness. There will be trouble and calamity for anyone who keeps doing what is evil, for the Jew first and also the Gentile. But there will be glory and honor and peace from God for all who do good, for the Jew first and also the Gentile. For God does not show favoritism. When the Gentiles sin, they will be destroyed, even though they never had God's written law. And the Jews, who do have God's written law, will be judged by that law when they fail to obey it. For merely listening to the law does not make us right with God. It is obeying the law that makes us right in His sight. It's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. Verse 14, even Gentiles who do not have God's written law show that they know His law when they instinctively obey it, even though without having heard it. They demonstrate that God's law is written on their hearts, for their own conscience and thoughts either accuse them or tell them they are doing right. And this is the message I proclaim, that the day is coming when God, through Jesus Christ, will judge everyone's secret life. Okay, so I mentioned that this Devo is titled, What is Your Secret Identity? And so I want to kind of break this down because Paul mentions 3 types of people here. And maybe you'll find your secret identity, so to speak, in one of these types of people. And so the first type of person is the stubborn person. In verse 8, it says, but he will pour out his anger and wrath on those who live for themselves, who refuse to obey the truth and instead live lives of wickedness. So the stubborn person. So here's Batman quote number 2. So Batman is in The Dark Knight, just about to defeat the Joker. And the Joker says this because he was about to fall, and Batman saves him before he could fall to his death because he wants to bring him in and put him in prison. Joker says this, you couldn't let me go, could you? This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. You truly are incorruptible, aren't you? When an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. So I read an article about this guy who ran a red light, and it had one of those camera things. So it took his picture and sent him a bill with his picture in there. And so the guy thought he would be clever, and so he took a picture of his check and then sent that into the police. He received another correspondence with a picture of handcuffs. And so he said, okay, so I better pay my bill. So this guy was thinking he was an unstoppable force, but he met the immovable object of the law, and then he obviously had to pay his bill. So are you the stubborn type of person? Are you the type of person that refuses to obey the truth, instead lives lives of wickedness? Well, you're going to meet an immovable object, and God is that immovable object. You are not an unstoppable force, and so you're going to have to answer for your sins. So that's the first type of person mentioned here, the stubborn person. The second type of person here is in verse 12, and it's the ignorant. So when the Gentiles sin, they will be destroyed, even though they never had God's written law. But just because you didn't know it was wrong doesn't make it any less wrong, right? That doesn't make any sense. So here's an example. In Dana Point, now there's a lot of weird laws on the book, but I was kind of reading up on different kind of weird laws. There's actually a game called, I think it's Boulder Dash, where it's like a game of all these different laws, and you have to like guess which one's a real law. Anyway, so if you ever get a chance to play that, it's pretty fun. In Dana Point, this is an actual law on the books. In Dana Point, you may not use your own bathroom if the window is open. You can't use your own bathroom if the window is open. Now, in my house, that might be a bad thing. You kind of want a window open, but let's just leave it at that. And so, like, how would, like, you get caught for breaking that law? I mean, I suppose some cops have a nose for crime. Anyway, so just because you didn't know that it was wrong doesn't mean that it makes it any less wrong. So number 1 is the stubborn type. You know what's wrong, you're just not going to do it. Or you know what's right, but you're not going to do what's right. And then the ignorant type, where you just don't know, but it doesn't make it any less wrong. And then number 3 is the accountable. And this is in verse 12 as well. And the Jews who do have God's law will be judged by that law when they fail to obey it. For merely listening to the law does not make us right with God. It is obeying the law that makes us right in his sight. For instance, my grandmother, who recently went to heaven last year in November, she was getting old in age and was not driving great. In fact, she drove down, took a right turn right down some train tracks with my wife and daughter in the car at one point. And so she started getting in some accidents. And so we had to kind of report her, and then she had to go and take her driver's test. And so my parents were like, great, this is awesome, because there's no way she's going to pass this driver's test. So they send her over, she takes the test, she passes the test. It's like, she should not be driving, but she passes the test. And so she was able to continue driving until she got in another accident, totaled her car, had her license removed and all this kind of stuff. But the point is, she knew the law, but she didn't drive as if she knew the law. So just kind of knowing the law doesn't help unless you employ it, because they're there for your better and for your good. And so here is my final Batman quote number 3, and why I've titled this Devo, What is Your Secret Identity? So at the end of The Dark Knight, again, spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen it yet, what are you doing with your life? Call in sick today to work. Watch the entire trilogy. You won't be sorry. Anyway, so at the end of I think it is it's the end of Batman Begins. Rachel, his love interest, comes up to him and he says, when Gotham no longer needs Batman, we can be together. And she says, when you take off your mask, we can be together. And he goes, oh, Batman's just a symbol. And then she says, no. She touches his face and says, this is your real mask. And I thought, okay, that's pretty awesome. His secret identity is actually his fake identity. And he actually is this persona. He's this hero, Batman. And so I thought that was a cool little play on the secret identity. Well, in verse 16, it says this. And this is the message I proclaim, that the day is coming when God, through Jesus Christ, will judge everyone's secret life. And so my question is to you, what's your real mask? What is your secret identity? Is it humility, or is it hypocrisy? Are you the stubborn type? Are you the ignorant type? Are you the accountable type? Because I'm telling you right now, you're all going to be held, and we're all going to be held accountable for what the law says. And then we're going to have to stand before the Lord. And so, in Ephesians 5, verse 1 through 2, it says this: imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love. Follow the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. So again, what is your secret identity? Is it humility, or is it hypocrisy? Is it judgment, or is it Jesus? Philippians 1:21, my favorite verse. I quote it all the time. I have it written down. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. And if you can truly stand there and say, you know what, for me to live is Christ, or for me to live is to strive to be like Christ, then I know that my future is secure. When I stand before the Lord, he will say, well done, good and faithful servant, enter into your glory. Public or private, we need to strive to live as Christ. And so, as it says in The Incredibles, it's time to make their secret identity their only identity. And the same is for us. Let's make our secret identity our only identity. Let's put on Christ. Let's identify with Christ. So that is what I have for you today. I love you guys, and I hope you're enjoying these. You can send me prayer requests at raymond@raymondgregory.com. If you like this video, if it ministered to you, give it a thumbs up maybe. And if you don't like this video, give it a thumbs down, and Batman will come and beat you to a pulp. No, he won't do that. And then share it so others can enjoy it as well. Maybe shoot me a comment about your favorite superhero franchise. As long as it's DC, will be cool. So, all right. So I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video.